Hello and welcome to the programme. This week we're on the North Kent coast in Herne Bay. I'm back here later, but first up, badgers have been a protected species for over 40 years. It means they're free to roam the countryside, and under normal circumstances, no one is allowed to disturb their setts or deliberately harm them. But some badgers carry a deadly disease, TB, and it's spreading from the West Country. Rachel Royce reports.
Not so long ago, this was a pretty rare sight in the southeast, but thanks to their status as a protected species, badgers are now common again. These are the lucky ones, rescued and cared for by the British Wildlife Centre at Lingfield. Visitors here love them, but badgers are also feared because of a disease they can carry.
These rescue badgers are healthy and safe. But out there in the wild, some badgers carry TB, and that can be passed on to cattle. So is it too late to have badger vaccination, or is a controversial cull in the southeast now inevitable?
In the wild, badgers live in setts, which are networks of underground tunnels. As badger numbers have increased, farmers say they are finding more setts on the grazing pastures shared by their cattle. Controversially, the government decided to allow the culling of badgers in pilot areas, and last year introduced a 25-year strategy to eradicate TB. That strategy includes the possibility of more culls in areas considered high risk. This map shows where the problem is worst. Big swathes of red in the west, high-risk areas where bovine TB is endemic. But look to the southeast and there's an island of red there too, a hotspot in East Sussex.
And this is it, the East Sussex TB hotspot. No one knows exactly how the disease got here, but now farmers in the local area have some tough decisions to make.
Farmers like William Craig, who owns Goat Farm near Ringmer. He's a third-generation farmer and his cattle had always been TB-free. But then he saw the disease come closer.
There'd been a hot spot in the area which was seemed to be contained on the other side of the A27. Sporadic cases kept getting ever closer to the farm.
So you could actually see it creeping nearer. Was that an alarming prospect?
Yes, very alarming, very alarming. It was inevitable that it would get here eventually.
With the TB edging ever closer, even West Sussex has more cases than usual right now, William had to stop selling raw milk, a popular product that had a market with customers around Lewes. TB can pass from cows to humans via unpasteurised milk. Then last year he got the news he'd been dreading. One of his cows had TB.
We'd made a decision earlier in that year that we were going to sell our beef stock and invest the money into the dairy part of the business. So having failing that test meant that we couldn't sell those animals. So it had an immediate devastating effect on our cash flow.
Now there is a possibility of controlling it in the wildlife, isn't there? I mean, the government has said that you can have a cull in a high-risk area, which East Sussex is.
Yes.
Is that something you've discussed with other farmers?
Yes, I think we need to see the results from these culls. No farmers are anti-badgers. We're anti-TB. We don't want to see the disease in the wildlife or in the cattle.
Many farmers are keen on a cull. In the West Country, they've had farmer-led pilot culls in 3 areas. At first, it was in Somerset and Gloucestershire. This autumn, the badger cull was extended to Dorset.
Culling badgers is a complicated business. It requires a special government licence. In this part of Dorset, the countryside near Blandford Forum, a cull began 6 weeks ago. They've got a target of killing around 800 badgers.
Farmers who want a cull have to pay for a specialist culling company who either trap the badgers and shoot them with shotguns or shoot them with rifles as they roam, known as free shooting. It's done at night. But while many farmers are keen on a cull, others are opposed, and killing badgers enrages some people who feel passionately that it's wrong. These protesters are out every night during culling, determined to disrupt the killings. A cull in East Sussex could see similar scenes.
It does make me angry because there's no need for it. I mean, it's now being proven as well as cattle to cattle is the main transfer. They just want to kill the badgers.
So how do you know where to patrol?
Experience. just things we found in places.
What sort of thing?
Baiting. We found baiting points up here, baiting points here, baiting points here. The killers are trying to suck the badgers out of the wood so they can shoot them.
The landowners who don't want the cull, can they prevent the shooters from coming on their land?
Oh yes, they do not have to sign up for the cull at all.
The government's very worried about bovine TB, calling it the most pressing animal health concern in the country. The disease can spread from species to species. The cattle can give it to each other. It's in the wildlife, but there's no one way of dealing with it. So where are we now with the science?
There's a dispute at the very highest level over whether the badger cull can have a meaningful impact on reducing bovine TB. We went first to see Nigel Gibbons, the UK Chief Veterinary Officer. His responsibilities include advising the government on bovine TB. I asked him what science the government is using to support the cull.
Largely a piece of work done over several years, costing £50 million, the randomised badger culling trial, which showed that if you intervene over a long enough period to reduce the badger population and keep it reduced, then you get a sustained drop in cattle TB breakdowns for both the period of the cull and for a period of at least 7 years thereafter.
But the man who actually set up the randomised badger culling trial is Lord Krebb, a renowned zoologist based at Oxford University and a former government advisor on bovine TB. He thinks the government's wrong to use his trial to condone culling.
And the experiment lasted for about 7 or 8 years. And it showed something really quite surprising to me. It showed that if you kill badgers in response to an outbreak of TB on a farm, in the cattle, you make things worse. That wasn't what I'd expected at all. If you kill badgers proactively, that is, you go into an area, and these areas were 100 square kilometres, so quite big areas, and you try and remove as many badgers as you can, then you have a small effect on reducing TB in cattle. The effect, the best estimate, is about 15% reduction, so it leaves 85% of the problem still there, in spite of all that effort of killing badgers, and you have to persist in the killing for several years. My view is that the science does not support killing badgers as a credible national strategy for controlling TB in cattle.
Seeing a badger, as caught on CCTV, snuffling around the food stores helps fuel fears that badgers are to blame for cattle TB. The government says they're responsible for 50% of cases, but that's a hotly contested figure. Others say it's 6%. At the moment, there is no vaccine available for cattle that's approved for use in the UK, but there is a badger vaccine, and that's being trialled in some areas, including East Sussex.
It's early in the morning, it's still pretty dark and cold. I'm with the volunteers now who go out vaccinating the badgers. They set some traps last night just around dusk, and we're going to see if any of them have caught a badger.
The Sussex Badger Vaccination Project are a charity. So far they've vaccinated 46 badgers this season with the agreement of the landowners. Today they're working on land owned by the Sussex Wildlife Trust.
How many traps have you got to check this morning? How many are there?
12.
12 traps, yeah. Okay. And you caught some yesterday?
Yeah, 4 yesterday, so...
See if there's any
shall
this
see.
morning. All right. Oh yeah, nothing there?
No, it hasn't even picked up any of the little trailings that we left out to tempt them in.
Several traps later and we still don't find any badgers, but they caught 4 yesterday and filmed them being vaccinated.
So we can have a look at that.
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Here's a badger I caught earlier.
Yeah.
Oh, there he is. Oh wow.
So there he is in the trap. So the first thing we do is assess him, just make sure he looks healthy and there's no obvious injuries from being in the trap, and he looked fine, so he's fit to vaccinate. We're pretty much at the end of the season now, so now we'll start set surveying, which is going back out, checking what's changed on all the different sites, and we'll start again next spring.
The government is paying for badger vaccination in some areas of the country, but not in East Sussex, the theory being it's too late because badgers already have the disease. But should the government think again?
Because East Sussex is a small isolated pocket, if vaccination were going to work, East Sussex might be a good place to try it out. And what we need to do then is to vaccinate a sufficient proportion of the badger population so that the disease essentially dies out in badgers and so they can't be a source of transmission to cattle.
On the East Sussex question, the government's chief vet agrees.
We made money available for vaccination pilots. That might happen again, but I agree that East Sussex is an interesting area to consider.
But it's not just animal rights activists who are against the cull. A large number of vets, members of the British Veterinary Association, now believe the cull is inhumane because of the difficulty of making a clean kill in the dark at night. This next photograph may be upsetting to viewers, but shows a badger that had suffered multiple gunshot wounds that tried to dig a hole before dying. Lord Krebb is a signatory to a letter from a dozen top scientists condemning the cull for, amongst other things, being inhumane.
And they had a target of what proportion of badgers should die within a very short period, within a few seconds of being shot. Because obviously it would be inhumane to have limping, wounded badgers wandering around the countryside with bullets in them. And the government set a target, and the independent panel that reviewed the data said the government didn't meet its target. So in that sense, they failed to meet the humaneness target.
So is the UK's chief vet concerned about the welfare of badgers that are killed during the culls?
I think looking at what's being achieved, culling is comparable with other culling. So we cull foxes, rabbits, deer. The countryside is a place where wildlife are managed, and it's comparable to that. So on that basis, I think it's comparable and therefore sensible to continue for the benefits that we look to achieve.
Like many farmers, William Craig wants an end to the misery of bovine TB, however it's achieved.
Cattle controls and wildlife controls have to go in hand to be able to tackle this disease, otherwise we'll get nowhere.
Feelings are running high about the badger cull, but it remains a tool, along with badger vaccination, in the national strategy for eradicating bovine TB. The government, farmers and animal lovers want an end to this disease.
Rachel Royce reporting. Coming up on Inside Out. Is it a bright future for Brighton's Royal Pavilion?
The pavilion